Bernice Jackson. I'm with the Alumni Association for Riverside. I'm the Director of the Career Services Program. Bernice, while it seems like there's a slight bit of audio feedback. Can you hear any audio feedback, Bernice?
I do not know.
I'm going to do a very quick introduction and then I'm going to mute myself. To our attendees who are on the call, make sure that you do mute yourself. We want to make sure that you're appearance and sound. Bernice Jackson, I'm with the Alumni Association, and we have Bernice Maldonado with us. Bernice is a talent. You get all of your information for us. Bernice is an alumna of UC Riverside, talent development and professional and she does have her career practice growing forward. And also has served for a number of years as a chief consultant and has an intimate knowledge of recruiting and talent development from the inside of organizations. She's also a preferred partner with us here at UC Riverside's Alumni Association. And if you're interested in her work, please take a look at our website. That's alumni.ucr.edu/career services. You'll be able to see Bernice's bio there, and you can reach out to her for her individual services. Just a reminder that questions throughout today's session can be asked at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a Q&A panel. Please make sure you ask those questions throughout today's session. We want to make sure that your questions get answered. Really, the focus of today's conversation is to be able to ask those questions so that you can advance in your career and get the professional development help that you need. And without further ado, again, thank you so much, Bernice, for being with us. We really greatly value your attendance, both as a UCR alumna as well as an expert in this field of career and talent development. And so I'll let you take it away on our topic, building a professional presence through communication, dress, and nonverbal cues.
Thank you so much, Louise, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And I do want to applaud those of you that are on today's webinar. This is a super important topic that I feel is a lot of times overlooked by a lot of people, and they don't realize the importance of professional presence and the impact it can have on your career if you're not doing it correctly. So I really want to applaud those of you that are taking the time to attend right now. I know we're all super busy, but I'm really hoping that I provide some information that you can apply right away, that you can think about, and that you can use to help elevate your opportunities for career success. So with that said, I do want to also just comment on that. The reason I even got into this is because of my own personal experiences. Both of my parents, neither of them had a lot of education, neither of them went to college, neither of them worked in professional environments. They were both factory workers. And so one of my first jobs in high school was working at a bank. And so I quickly realized that there was a lot of information or guidance about professional presence that I didn't have from my home life. So I had to learn a lot of it. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but luckily there was a lot of good people in my life that kind of helped guide and coach me. So now with that said, now that I've been in corporate for over 20 years, I want to pass on that knowledge and give other people tips and advice that will help them, because I certainly think that my focus on professional presence really helped me in my career and really helped advance me in a lot of different opportunities. So again, I want to pass that along. And as Louise said, you can ask questions throughout, and please do not hesitate to ask questions. This is a really good opportunity for you to ask any question, and don't ever think that you have any silly or dumb questions. We want to hear all of them, because if you have a question, I'm pretty certain someone else has a similar question as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I do have a presentation which you will get access to after today's session. There's a lot of information in there, I understand, but I'm going to try to get through it so I can answer some questions that you may have, or maybe that I didn't cover in the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll go ahead and get started. Louise, can you give me a nod to let me know if you can see the presentation on your site? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we're talking about professional presence. So the first thing is, what is professional presence? So professional presence is made up of three components, which I call the ABCs of professional presence. So that's appearance, that's the way you look. That includes the way you dress and your grooming, your behavior, so that's the way you act, and communication is the way you talk and write. So those are some of the three key components of professional presence, and we'll be talking about each of those today. And so just to give a little bit more of an explanation of each is starting with appearance. This is the visual communication, and this is the way you dress and your grooming as well. So it's also not only the way you dress and groom yourself, but also making sure that it's appropriate for that work environment. So for those of us, especially on the West Coast and in California, I know there's a lot of industries where the dress codes are very drastically different. So for example, I know a lot of people who are attorneys and still wear business suits, whereas I know others in creative industries where they wear jeans to work every day. So again, it's using your knowledge and your judgment to determine what is the appropriate dress in the work environment you're in. Secondly, it's behavior, the B of the ABCs of professional presence. So that's the way you demonstrate respect for other people, your organization, through manners and etiquette. And so, for example, the way you demonstrate it would be the way you introduce people or the way you shake hands with someone. Third is communication. So it's the verbal and nonverbal messages that you send off. So for example, your ability to speak effectively, or the way you sit up, or your posture during a meeting. So overall, professional presence, when people say, well, what are some examples of someone who demonstrates professional presence? So that can include someone when you just see them, you say, wow, they really look the part. They always look like they, made the time to get themselves ready for whatever occasion it is, and it's their visual signature. I'm sure some of you have either met someone or know someone where every time you see them, they just look ready and prepared, whether it's for a business meeting, whether it's for an after work event. They just always look like they look the part, or they're ready to be there, like they took the time to actually put themselves together. The other ways that you can see professional presence is the person just radiates confidence all the time. They project poise, authority, and credibility. They maintain high levels of self-awareness. So in other words, they're very aware of the messages that their appearance or their communication or their behaviors are giving off. They're also authentic. I know that's a big concern for people, especially when you're starting, when you're working in a professional or corporate environment. I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't want to look like something that I'm really not. And that's the whole purpose of understanding your own professional presence, is understanding what's appropriate and how can you incorporate your own personality into it. The other thing is people that have professional presence, they build on their own strengths. So they know what they're good at. They know when to speak. They know if they are better at speaking one-on-one or in groups. They just know their own strengths and they build on it. They also are aware of their gaps. So they understand what things they have to work on, and they work on them, in other words. So why is professional presence important? So there's a lot of reasons. The other thing that we're going to be covering along the way too is how important it is, and how you need to maintain consistency across your entire career cycle. So in other words, everything from your current online presence, so what's showing up online when people either search for you or Google you, all the way throughout your career. So for those of you who are either looking for a job or are in a job or are looking to get promoted or advance in a job, you have to maintain that consistency of professional presence throughout. And so that's what we'll be talking about, is giving tips on the different portions of, before you get that job, when you get the interview, and when you're in the job, how to display professional presence throughout. But the key message here is to make sure that you are being consistent throughout all of these different phases. Because if you do it correctly, it gives you a great first positive impression about you. So if you have, a negative social media presence, maybe you have negative posts that are very controversial, or maybe you have images or photographs of yourself that maybe don't reflect the best positive image about you, that could really affect your ability to get a position. Because as many of you know, a lot of recruiters and companies now use social media to kind of do a informal interview, or kind of look at the kind of person you are before they even hire you. It could also give you a competitive edge during your interviews. So if you have really good professional presence, someone can, perhaps they weren't, perhaps they had another candidate in mind that they may have wanted to hire, or perhaps they have, they had a role that they wanted to fill, but you come in, you show some great professional presence during the interview, and you may get offered even a better opportunity or a different opportunity that they want to see you in. And that actually happened to me one time when I was interviewing for a bank. I actually went for a call center job, but the hiring manager, she really liked the way I communicated. So she said, I don't want you to be, behind the scenes. I actually want you to be talking to our customers. So I ended up getting a supervisory role, which was a much higher role than I expected. And again, it was because I was able to communicate well, and that's the type of person they wanted for that specific supervisory role. The other thing is, employers often decide whether a job applicant will fit into their organization based on first impression. So that's the reality. A lot of times when they take a look at you, hear the way you speak and behave, they'll make a determination as to whether you fit into their organizational culture. So it's really important to understand that. You can get selected for high visibility presentations and opportunities. So if someone sees that you present, again, a really good professional presence, they may just select you for more of those high visibility, or what we call those type of roles where, there's a lot of visibility to it, where a lot of people know about it. It's kind of a company goal that's aligned to it. So it'll just, we'll just get access to more of those opportunities. Also positions or promotions to positions of greater responsibility, of course, will come out of it, or can come out of it. Improved performance ratings and identified as high potential. So there's a lot of studies out there that say that people who demonstrate positive professional presence often get rated higher on performance ratings. A lot of times people will, look at your work, but they'll also consider the way you present yourself. And what happens out of that is a lot of times you'll get a higher performance rating because you just come ready and prepared to contribute to the organization. And then last but not least, of course, improves your chances for long-term career success. So that's what we're really trying to do, is give you tips and tools that will help you kind of present yourself in a better way. And also, so you won't have to worry about that. You can kind of have these tips and apply them right away. And you can kind of gauge and see how it helps, and see how you can personalize it for yourself and use them as appropriate. But the whole thing out of this slide here is make sure to be consistent. Whatever people are seeing online, whatever people hear and see in person, it should be very consistent. So that's really, really the driving key takeaway off of this slide. So let's talk about appearance. So the first area of appearance I wanted to start with is online appearance. So I know that's one of the first things that a lot of people are using now to kind of find someone or look someone up. So the first thing I wanted to share is an online self-assessment that you can do, just to kind of determine, what does your online appearance look like? So some questions you can ask yourself is, right now with your online appearance, meaning the way you look on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, do you feel confident about what that looks like? The images you have on there, the pictures, the content, what you've written, are you confident about what you're sharing out there? And then describe why or why not. Does your social media reflect who you want companies to see before they meet you? And again, a lot of times people will just say, is your social media something that you would feel comfortable sharing with your mom or your grandma, whatever it might be? Just think about that. What are your online appearance goals? And does your current online appearance reflect those goals? So if you are out there looking for a job, again, what are your goals for them to look at? Do you want to show people that you're creative, that you're adventurous, that you're a risk taker, whatever it might be? And I also provided here some adjectives that you can think about. Choosing 5 adjectives, how you want to describe yourself visually. And think about that. You may just, choose some adjectives and look back at your online appearance and determine that they don't align. So that's when you have to determine what changes you want to make or that you need to make in order to align those a little bit better. So how to ensure a positive online appearance. So the first thing to do is, as I mentioned previously, just do a quick online audit. Look at all of your social media, look at Google your name and see what comes up. See if anything, that negative or anything you don't want showing comes up. Also make sure that you're aware of if you're being tagged on any photos or any videos or anything else. You may just want to make sure that, let your friends know, don't tag me for the next couple of months because I'm applying for a job and I really, I really want to make sure that I know what's being posted and, that kind of thing. So do a quick online audit and see what comes up when you Google your name. LinkedIn, if you're using, well, number one, if you are not on LinkedIn, you should be on LinkedIn. You need to develop an online profile, especially for those of us who are looking to, get a job or, it's definitely super important to have a good LinkedIn profile. And make sure to keep your information and photos updated. There's been a lot of instances where the person I met, or when I met someone in person, they looked totally different from the picture they had posted on LinkedIn. So just make sure that they're, that they're consistent, again, consistency. And make sure you have a professional photo. I've seen a lot of LinkedIn accounts where it's a very casual kind of, I've even seen people with, that they look like they were maybe at a party or, some kind of something. They have their kids or maybe their spouses in the picture. You need to make sure it's a professional photo and it's just of you and it reflects, again, the person that you want the company to see. Also, make sure to include relevant accomplishments, education, and volunteering. Kind of gives just, again, this is an online resume, and a lot of times this is the first place that companies are going to visit when they're hiring people. So just make sure to keep everything relevant to the type of either role or job or company you're trying to apply to. And also make sure to check your spelling and grammar. That's super important. As far as social media, again, we kind of already touched on it, but what is it that you want the company to see or read about you? So do make sure to reflect your personality in it. I mean, it's great to see people's, out of, office activities, the trips they've taken, any hobbies that they have. It's really, really interesting to see people and what they do outside of work. And again, make sure to use good spelling and grammar. I know a lot of times on social media, we like to shorten everything up, but again, if you're looking for a job or looking to change jobs or even get a promotion, just make sure that you're kind of keeping all of these things in mind as you're making posts or adding pictures or whatever it might be. So now that we are going now into interview tips on appearance, related to appearance, I put together kind of some don'ts and do's for interviews and specific to appearance. So some don'ts, don't wear clothes that are too tight, too loose, or maybe high-rise or too high or too low. Maybe just generally wear clothes that fits you. Don't wear clothes that's too tight, again, or too loose. Don't wear strong perfume or eat foods with strong odors. Don't wear casual shoes. So for example, sneakers, or for women, don't wear, stilettos or strappy type of shoes. Just wear some simple, regular heels, heels for women. Don't wear loud or oversized jewelry. And the reason is, maybe some of us speak with our hands a lot. And if you're wearing, some bracelets that are really big or loud, it may really interrupt or maybe distract the interviewer. Don't wear anything that you have to question or makes you feel uncomfortable. A lot of times we put on an outfit where we just didn't feel great. So definitely if you don't feel good in that outfit, don't wear it. Always make sure to wear an outfit that makes you feel great, especially for an interview. And make sure it's an outfit where you can kind of move around and you feel comfortable and it's gonna allow you to really just feel confident during an interview. Be sure not to wear flimsy or see-through clothing, and don't carry oversized or clunky bags or just a lot of stuff in your pockets. Or generally, just try to keep everything to a minimum so that you're focused on the interview and there isn't any other distractions. And of course, turning off your cell phone I've been, when I was in human resources, I spent several years in human resources as a recruiter, as a employee relations, and as a hiring manager. And so I saw a lot of people come in with a lot of distractions, phones going off, arriving late, those kind of things. So definitely make sure to focus on the interview and don't bring in any distractions. Now, some of the do's is, of course, wear clothes that align with the company culture. Now, I'm going to touch on something really quick. I get oftentimes a lot of questions about, well, I'm applying to a company that is very, very casual. How should I dress for the interview? So I'm going to address that right away. So I personally recommend not to dress to dress at least one level up. So in other words, if everyone is wearing, if you're interviewing for a very creative or very casual environment where everyone is wearing jeans, the simple way to dress one level up would be to, for example, wear some khakis or dockers for guys, or for women, you can wear, very simple trousers and a top, a nice top. You don't have to go, you don't have to wear a business suit and that's going to the other extreme. I caution people not to always assume that they have to wear a business suit. I haven't worn I can't even remember the last time I wore a business suit because a lot of the environments I've worked in were very casual. So I kind of always keep it a level up. So again, if it's a super casual environment, just try to keep it a level up for the interview. And then once you get the job, you can then determine, what your kind of professional presence will be in that environment. But it's definitely important to keep it at least one level up during the interview. Just don't go too extreme. So again, if you anticipate that the interviewer might be wearing jeans, don't wear a business suit because that just shows that you're not informed or you haven't taken the time to do research on the company or the company culture. Also, we've already touched on this, make sure that the clothing fits you and make sure to keep it simple. Don't wear, very extreme patterns or, super, super bright colors. You can definitely wear color, that's not the point, but don't wear, a red suit head to toe. Just make sure to just keep it simple. Women, just a suggestion is to keep your heels maybe 3 inches or lower. And that's for a lot of different reasons is, number one, for safety, because, you always get nervous on an interview and you don't want to trip and fall before you walk in. But secondly, just, keep it simple again. Just keep it simple with the shoes. It just shows kind of a more classic look. And then make sure that you have the appropriate grooming, such as making sure your hair is combed, that your nails are clean, that you're wearing deodorant. I know that's very, very kind of, seems like common sense, but you'll be surprised about the interviewees that I've seen come in. I've seen people come in with their hair wet as though they just got out of the shower and maybe they just remembered that they had an interview this morning and they walked in that way. So make sure that you just look appropriate for the interview. Moving on the job. So I often get a lot of questions about, so how do I dress once I'm on the job? So your role as a professional is to determine what is appropriate. And again, I already touched on it earlier, but I know with today's industries, especially on the West Coast, there's a lot of extremes. There's everything from very casual to very conservative. So there is that gray area that I know a lot of people struggle with, but what I would recommend is to really be observant, especially within the group that you're working for. Because even within one company, there can be a lot of different dress codes. There can be one group that dresses very casually, and there can be another group that dresses in a very conservative manner. So what my recommendation is to use observation and determine what is appropriate. The other caution I say is, I know there's a lot of, just be cautious when you hear about dress for success presentations or things like that. They always have great information, but I think you really, at the end of the day, you really have to determine yourself what is appropriate for that work environment. And if you're having trouble kind of determining it because you may be seeing people, some people within your same group dress very casual where others are dressing more formal, I would just, maybe sit down and speak with your manager and just clarify it, because you want to make sure that you're dressing appropriately, but you also want to make sure that you're doing it in the right way and not going towards any extreme. So this next slide, just a couple of examples. Again, this is not intended to be a prescriptive slide. It's more just intended to show just a couple of examples. But these are kind of examples of professional dress for women. So I've worked in a lot of different industries, everything from creative to very conservative. And so this is typically what I have seen, at least as far as examples from informal, which is considered casual, all the way to semi-formal, which is more professional, to formal and conservative. So again, these are just some examples that you can just use and kind of as guidelines for you if you're kind of trying to determine what you should wear for different environments. But again, this is not intended to be, a prescriptive, this is what you should wear. This is more just some examples of, for you to think about. Professional dress for men, again, just some more examples of what I've seen. And again, this is also based on feedback that I've gotten from managers as far as managers and leaders as far as how they want to see their employees dress. One quick comment I will make is that I know a lot of industries are trying to incorporate casual dress into their environments, but what I am hearing is that they're starting to pull back from that because people are going to a little bit of an extreme when it comes to casual. I've seen people come in with flip-flops and shorts into work environments that were intended to be professional. And so because a lot of companies are starting to see that, they're starting to pull back and say, no, we kind of want a little bit more professionally dressed to work now. So we're pulling back now on the casual work environment. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you're staying updated with what the company and managers and others would like to see kind of the professional. Another question that comes up a lot from people is, should I wear color to work? And I know a lot of times in a lot of environments, you'll see people wearing a lot of dark colors and not a lot of color to work. My immediate response is yes, you definitely should wear color, but definitely also, take the prior tips. Be observant about how other people wear color. One of the easiest ways to wear color is to wear, for example, a darker sweater or jacket, and then, underneath it, one of your bright favorite colors, just to add a little bit of color to it. But don't hesitate in wearing color at all. It actually can, there's been studies that color can actually elevate your mood. And also it sends off some really positive nonverbal communication cues if you're, wearing a really good color. So a quick tip on how to determine what colors complement you is think about the type of jewelry. If you wear jewelry, the type of jewelry you have a tendency to wear. So if you have a tendency to wear silver jewelry, you may be more of a cool person, meaning the cool colors on the right-hand side. If you tend to wear more gold jewelry, then you may be more of a warm colored person, meaning the colors on the left-hand side may be more suitable for you. If you have a tendency to wear both gold and silver, then you may just, compliment yourself by wearing both warm and cool colors. So again, just a really quick tip for those of you that may not, wear a lot of color to work, and maybe you're interested in wearing more color. Just some quick tips on how to find colors that complement you best. Another thing I wanted to really touch on quickly is appearance on remote meetings. So a lot of times interviews and also meetings while on the job will happen now remotely, as we're doing right now. So some quick tips on your appearance is make sure your outfit is not distracting. Don't wear a lot of patterns or colors that may just not reflect well on video. Your background, the background that you have, make sure that it's not distracting. If it's a plain background, you can stand out with more color or maybe a little bit of pattern. Make sure that you're framing yourself correctly. So see at least a lot of times we recommend that at least they'll be able to see your hands a little bit. Make sure that your head is being held straight. And a lot of times recommend to make your hands visible, or at least from the chest up. As far as eye contact, again, make sure that you're looking at the camera and that it's elevated at least 4 to 6 inches from natural eye contact. That just has a better positioning there.
I have a question, Bernice.
Yes.
Online meetings, I do know that there's varied advice out there as to whether get yourself dressed up in your suit, even if that first interview or that online interaction with someone that you haven't met before is going to be by phone and there's going to be no visual aspect to it, as that may impact your confidence, your sense of self-worth. What is your advice for our alumni as they're preparing to have that, whether that's a first time meeting, if they're employed, or even if that's an interview, how best to prepare their visual, their dress, even if they may not be seen by their interviewer?
Oh, sure. So definitely really important to obviously plan out your outfit. So make sure that, again, that you feel comfortable and most importantly, confident. And make sure that it not only reflects professionalism, but it's also kind of has a touch of your personality in it. So that's definitely something that you should take into consideration if you're not seeing them, because at least you'll have that confidence and it will radiate off and people will be able to hear it. And you'll be able to hear it in your voice, that confidence as well. Did that answer your question, Louise?
Absolutely, and that, you know, that goes with some of the advice that I have heard, to say sometimes even if you may not have a visual of someone, their sense of confidence comes out even in their verbal communication on the phone. And so it's definitely something that I think is great advice, Bernice. Thank you.
Good. And some last guidelines on appearance is, of course, your online profile should match your in-person appearance. Observe and determine what's appropriate for your work environment. Go by how something fits you, not by size. I wanted to cover that because I think a lot of times we often get caught up in, what's my size kind of thing. Don't worry about it. Make sure it fits you. Professional clothing doesn't have to be costly. When I was in college and high school and I was working, a lot of my clothes came from the Goodwill, and people never even noticed it. I actually often got asked, where do I buy my clothes? But again, it does not have to be costly to dress in a professional manner. You can always repurpose clothing by adding, little details like buttons or shortening sleeves. And always, if you're unsure about an outfit, don't wear it. If you don't feel confident in it, just don't wear it. Just choose something that you're confident with. And don't be shy about recycling your clothes. So if you really like a jacket, wear it and just change the top that you're wearing under it. Because if you feel confident in it, why not wear it? Or, buy 2 of them. I've had people, I often, if there's a jacket or, some type of clothing that I really like, I often will buy 2 of them, or I'll buy it in different colors, the exact same style. I have friends who question that and say, why would you buy the same exact style of, of clothing? I'm like, well, I feel good in it. Why not buy it, twice? Because I know eventually one day I'm going to have to get rid of one of them, or, I could buy it in different colors and I could wear it, other times. So just a couple of quick tips on that. So let's talk about behavior now. So some interview behavior tips, quick tips, is of course be on time. If anything, get there super early, sit in the parking lot and wait, until the time comes. There's nothing worse than, arriving late to an interview and you're, frantic and frazzled, and the interviewer will definitely see that. And of course, that's not a good impression for the first interview. Make sure that you greet everyone and show respect to everyone. I've been in hiring situations where, I spoke to our receptionist or administrative assistant afterward, and they said, wow, that candidate was really mean to me. So always make sure people are always watching you, the way you greet people or treat everyone. We've made hiring decisions that way where, depending on how they greeted, or, if they treated our front staff, front office staff with respect. If they disrespected them, then that was a hiring decision. We said, we want this person to show everyone with respect. So we would rather hire someone who treats everyone with that same level of respect. Make sure to give a firm handshake. Really important, make sure to practice your handshake. Even with people that have been, senior professionals, I've shaken their hands and they just had a really bad handshake. So whether it's too limp, whether it's too firm, whatever it might be, practice your handshake and get feedback on it. Practice your handshake with your friends, with your, family members, whoever it might be, but make sure that you have a good firm handshake, because that's another first impression thing that comes out of when you first meet people. Keep good eye contact. This is really, really important, and I really emphasize that because for myself, I'm an introvert, and for a long time, I didn't look at people in the eye, and people actually questioned whether I was interested, whether I was listening. So make sure to keep good eye contact. Make sure not to say negative things during your interview. So if they ask you about your previous employer or about your previous manager, do not say any negative things. And make sure to demonstrate interest in the opportunity. And you can do this by researching the company beforehand and asking questions, asking appropriate questions, relevant questions to the company and to the job role.
Bernice, can I interject?
Yes.
So I know that you mentioned introversion. I know that this sometimes is a challenge for a number of the US workforce, and I'm sure our alumni on the call, in today's day and age, most of us work in an open plan office. As an introvert, sometimes that can be challenging, knowing that, time to sort of regroup and re-energize. Do you have any advice potentially for our introverts on the call as to, for example, let's say they're in a meeting and they have a hard time getting their voice heard. Do you have any advice for them as to how they might prepare for that?
Sure. So number one, this is why the job interview is super important. Personally, I know I would not like to work in an open work environment. So during the job interview, make sure to ask those kind of questions. So what kind of environment will this position, be working in? Is it open? Because a lot of companies are moving to open work environments, open plan environment. And so that's really, really critical question to ask, because if you really, really don't like working in that kind of environment, you're not going to be happy going to work every day. So I would definitely use the job interview to interview the company. You want to make sure that the company that you may get a job at is the type of environment and culture that you want to be in. So that's number one. Try to get as much information up front before you get into that environment. If you do go into that environment, or maybe a lot of times the company may change their kind of work plan setup. I know that happened to us. We went from having kind of really private cubicles with really high walls to now we were kind of in an open plan environment. Just make sure that you see if you have an opportunity to kind of choose your space, and you can let your manager know by saying, I really, like to have kind of a little bit more privacy. It's not, nothing against my coworkers or anything, but I kind of, tend to be introverted, and they should know this about you, but, I tend to be kind of an introvert and need a little bit more quiet space around it. So try to get maybe more of a, an area where it's kind of in the corner, or, maybe a little bit more quiet. Other things you can do is, I know I've seen people put up signs that say, working on a deadline, or privacy please, that kind of thing. Because in open environments, that pretty much means people can drop in whenever they want. And you may not be able to work that way. You may need kind of that thinking time to carry out your work. So that's another option, is putting, having friendly signs that say, and letting people know that you're putting up these signs, because that's the type of, work, that's the way you work. And as I'm saying that too, is I think it's important to communicate to people, your team, about your work style. And your team should be talking about that too. It's about work styles and making sure people understand how the team is most productive. So you may just want to let people know, every once in a while, if I'm working on a deadline, I'm going to put up a sign. The other things I know people have done is, maybe putting up plans or pictures of places that you really enjoy. So it kind of just gives you a little bit of an opportunity to just, kind of think about your other, relaxing places or more enjoyable places or things like that. The other thing about speaking at the meetings is the advice I always give is be prepared. So before you go into a meeting, be prepared with some questions or talking points that you have, and make sure that it's relevant to the conversation that is going on. So, and make sure you always think before you speak, of course. But for those introverts, I think for me, I always have to come prepared, and at least if there's something I can read beforehand, then I'll try to read it so I can kind of think through and analyze and think about some questions that I have, and I'll come prepared for the meeting. So you may just want to contact the meeting facilitator of the meeting lead and just say, is there any materials I can read or should read before the meeting because I want to come prepared, kind of thing. At least that's for me. A lot of times I'll need a little bit of time to think about the information so I can come up with some questions or some additional thoughts during the meeting. Some tips, yeah.
Thank you. That's great advice.
Sure. Let's see some examples of on-the-job management etiquette. So making sure that you make appropriate introductions and greetings, making sure you're able to initiate and maintain conversations, respecting and valuing the differences of others, being able to express appreciation. So I think this is, although it's kind of number 4 here, I think that's super important to express appreciation. Anytime someone has helped you with something, giving you some feedback or some advice, a simple thank you can make someone's day. It can really, really just change the perception about you and really just show professional presence if you really show and express appreciation. It could be a simple email saying, hey, thanks a lot, that really helped, kind of thing. Just always make sure to express appreciation. Knowing appropriate dining rules and protocol. I've attended training sessions on this because at one point I was attending a lot of company or representing a company at a lot of evening events, and so I had to be trained on dining and protocol. And there's a lot of information there. I definitely encourage you to maybe just read up on some tips that are online about dining rules and protocol. Extending courteous behavior to others and knowing how to behave in difficult situations. So always make sure and be aware of how you react to maybe when you get negative feedback or maybe some disappointing information. And make sure that you know how to behave in those situations so you remain calm and collected and you still remain professional in those different situations. So some quick guidelines on the job behaviors. Again, some of these we've already mentioned it. For example, be on time. So if you have a certain time you're supposed to be in your job, make sure to be on time. Very simple. Body language, make sure to stand up or sit up straight, maintain eye contact. Seek out opportunities. So if there's an interesting opportunity that you think may work on a skill or build up a skill that you're trying to work on, volunteer for that opportunity and take a risk on it. Make sure that you follow through, so accomplish what you will say you will do. Very, very important. If you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. If you're not able to meet it in a certain timeline, let that person know that you're not going to be able to meet that timeline and when you will be able to meet it. Don't wait until the last minute to let them know, oh, by the way, I know I told you I was going to submit this at noon, but it's noon now and I haven't gotten around to it. Just make sure that you just follow through and keep updated on everything. Keep yourself updated with news and current events. Surround yourself with ambitious, successful, and positive people. There's nothing worse than hanging out with someone who is always negative and just complaining. We all know how emotionally draining that can be to be around someone like that. So make sure to just surround yourself around positive people. It really, really makes a difference. Remember to check your online behavior. What are you showing? How are you showing up on social media? A quick tip on introductions. So a lot of times people ask me, how do I make an appropriate introduction? So you always introduce the person of greater authority to the person of lesser authority. So the correct way would be, Mr. or Mrs. Greater Authority, I would like to introduce you to Mr. or Mrs. Lesser Authority. I know that sounds kind of mean or, kind of degrading, but it's not. This is the appropriate way of making an introduction. The incorrect way would be, Mr. or Mrs. of Greater Authority, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. or Mrs. Lesser Authority. So an example would be, say the President of the United States receives a private citizen. The correct way would be, Mr. President, I would like to introduce to you Mr. John Doe, legal correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. So just a quick example, if you're ever in a situation where you have to introduce someone, maybe you're like at a company party or you're networking, just something to keep in mind when you're in this kind of situations. Last but not least, it's the C of the ABCs of professional presence, and that's communication. So interview communication tips, again, I will always emphasize this: be prepared, always be prepared. Research the company, research the role that you're applying for, and make sure to practice the questions beforehand. And think about examples that you want to share during the meeting. A lot of times, a lot of interviews will be what are called situational behavior interviews. So they will ask you, for example, give me an example of a time where you had a really difficult customer. How did you handle it? What did you do? Who did you inform? So it'll almost be similar to, it's one question, but there's several questions tied to it. So make sure that you're practicing how to respond to these behavioral interviews in different situations, and make sure that you're also thinking about potential questions that they might ask you. So at least you are prepared for the interview. Make sure to practice good nonverbal communication. So again, standing up straight, making eye contact, sitting up straight during the interview. Make sure to listen and answer the question. I've been in a lot of interviewing situations where I was asking a question, but they weren't answering the question. So I never really got to understand what their experience was or what value they were bringing to the company. And also make sure to use appropriate language. Don't use slang during the interview, and don't use filler words such as those are kind of filler words there. Or a lot of time, and I've caught myself saying so a lot during this presentation. So those are examples of filler words. Communication, sure.
Bernice, just to encourage our alumni, I know you've covered a lot of content now on interviewing. We do have an interview guide where we can really dig into a bunch of frameworks that you can use as you prepare for those behavioral type questions, some of the big questions that you're going to get in your interview. All of that's covered in our guide. So if you're not familiar with it, that is on our website, alumni.ucr.edu. You can take a look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. And one quick tip, especially for people who are more shy or introverted, I would definitely practice talking about yourself, talking about what your skills are, what your hobbies are. I know for myself too, I get very nervous when people start asking me about personal things or about me personally. I have no problem talking about work or or about information that I have or that I can share with other people. But when it comes to me sharing stuff about my personal life, I tend to get a little bit nervous about that. It's more shyness. I'm just not used to sharing a lot of information about my personal life. But make sure to practice that in advance. Make sure to think about, what are my hobbies? What did I do last weekend? Because even during an interview, I've asked people, how was your weekend, or what did you do this weekend? And they forget. And only because they're nervous and a lot of things, but just make sure to practice talking about yourself as well. And make sure to practice with other people so that you start feeling comfortable, because talking about yourself can help you, whether it's at a networking event, whether you're in an elevator with a potential hiring manager or the CEO of a company, whatever it might be. It's definitely really good just to feel comfortable talking about yourself. So let's talk a little bit about communication on the job. So how to maximize the qualities of your voice. So one quick, really important tip is to lower your tone. So don't talk in a very high-pitched tone. Make sure to slow the pace of your talking, and make sure that you have clear projection, that you're enunciating the words, etc. And this is good just for a lot of different reasons. Um, I know a lot of people, when they speak openly in groups, they tend to get very nervous and they tend to start speaking very quickly. So just make sure to be aware and slow down or lower your tone and slow your pace. The other thing too is we're working in such a global market with so many different people of different backgrounds. It'll just be better communication if everyone can kind of understand and really listen to what you're saying, because you're speaking very, very quickly. There may be people in the room who, are second, English is their second language, and they just may be trying to really understand what you're trying to say. So just make sure to keep that in mind. Make sure to use a down and not an up intonation. So what that means is don't sound like you're asking a question after every comment that you're saying. For example, are we going to have this meeting next week? I've heard people that kind of do that. They kind of, their intonation goes up at the end of the sentence, so it makes it sound almost like they're either asking a question or they're not sure about what they're saying. So just make sure to keep it consistent. Convey clarity, relevance, precision, and knowledge through verbal messages. So make sure to bring up relevant points. Make sure that it's on topic of that conversation. If something comes up that's off topic, maybe you can bring it up at the end of the meeting, at a roundtable session for any additional questions, or you can talk to the person afterward if it's something that can be taken offline. But make sure to bring up relevant points, because again, everyone has very limited time, and you want to make sure that you're not only respecting people's time, but you're also showing, again, professional presence, and that you're asking relevant and bringing up relevant points. Also, make sure that you're always clear, simple, and consistent in your messaging. Less is always more. One quick example is if someone asks you a question, make sure to be very clear and consistent. For example, if someone asks you, what's the status of the project? You can say something like, we are on track. We've discovered 2 key issues, but we're resolving them, and they will be resolved by the end of next week. Versus someone who is not answering it in a relevant manner. In other words, they may say, well, our team ran into a few problems, and now we're thinking about maybe doing some alternative measures. And over the weekend, I also had problems with, some of my kids, so I wasn't able to, really work on it. Don't do that. Just be very, very clear, answer the question, be consistent, be precise, and just give the information you're looking for. It just helps. It just, again, demonstrates professional presence to answer the question. Always think first and then speak. Don't share any internal debates that you have going on. Just make sure to, again, always think first and then speak. Some things to consider, how to kind of assess your own communication skills, is you can actually video yourself, record yourself, use your iPhone, use your whatever phone you have. And you can do a presentation and record yourself. And things that you can look at is the pace of the way you speak, the pace of your speaking, whether you your pronunciation of different words, the volume, whether you're using a lot of filler words like that kind of thing, whether you're using acronyms. A lot of companies have a lot of acronyms. Try to avoid using acronyms. I versus we. So just a quick tip is it's important to, depending on what you're speaking about, is when you use I versus we. So for example, if you're sharing an opinion or a recommendation, you would use more I words. Versus if you're talking to a team or it's more team affiliated type of conversations, you would use more we statements. So we achieved this, we were able to accomplish this, we were able to complete this kind of thing. So making sure you use it appropriately. Whether you're making a statement and saying sorry. Really important. I know, especially for women, I've observed that women have a tendency to say sorry a lot. So for example, if, as a manager, coming up to a employee and saying, hey, I saw that you weren't able to meet the deadline. Oh, I'm sorry. don't say sorry, just, recognize it, get the feedback, and let them know that you're going to finish it or what your new deadline is or whatever it might be. Just try to avoid saying sorry as much as possible in a business environment, because it just doesn't reflect professional presence saying sorry at every comment or feedback that's given to you. Hope that makes sense. Some quick nonverbal communication, so make sure you smile. I actually have been practicing that my entire life because I have a very serious face, so I always have to remind myself to smile, and people remind me too. They always say, you need to smile a little bit more, so that's like a lifelong thing that I'm working on. So I'm definitely aware of that, and I definitely try to keep that in mind. Sitting up and leaning forward, touching other people. Now you have to be very, very careful about that, especially nowadays. So make sure you're aware if you're touching other people, and if you are, is it appropriate? Eye contact, our walk. So the way we walk says a lot about us as well. So just make sure you're walking upright and you just project on confidence. Standing up straight, making sure you're aware of your handshake and open body language. There's some open body language exercises you can take away here that when you get this presentation, you can practice on your own. Some last words on communication: choose your words wisely, both in person and online. Make sure to always be direct and concise. Practice speaking and not using filler words, and learn how to talk about yourself. So we covered all of those things. And one last thing I want to share with the group is a personal action plan that you can use right away. So now we've shared a few tips with you and a few other things that you can use right away. So this personal action plan you can use by identifying what communication or appearance or behavior you will stop doing, what you will start doing, what you will continue doing, and what your deadline is for it. So just a little quick action plan that you can use to start kind of improving or working on your professional presence, and something you can use right away. So that is it for right now. And just a quick summary: the way you present yourself professionally not only affects how others react and interact with you, but also affects your self-confidence and performance. And I hope I provided some good information or tips. But now it's time to hear some of your questions. Again, no questions are bad questions or silly questions. This is a good opportunity to ask any question that you have.
Thank you so much, Bernice. You covered a huge amount of content.
Good.
I'm grateful for all of the advice to our alumni on the call. This recording of today's session will be available to you after today's session. We are at the top of the hour and want to be cognizant of our time for our attendees. We have a couple of minutes potentially if you have any urgent questions. Now is your opportunity to ask those. All of your advice is just spot on, phenomenal. A lot of what you've covered is on our website. That's alumni.ucr.edu. So I'm going to give you guys just 1 minute to get those questions in. And it looks like, Bernice, we actually don't have any urgent questions, but I do believe we have one question that just came through. So let me go ahead and get that one addressed, and then I think we'll tie up after that. So someone's asking about fingernail polish. Do you have any suggestions as to color? If someone likes to wear a fun color, potentially like a bright orange, what is your advice with regards to that in women's?
Oh, sure. So for interview, keep it simple. Whether it's clear nail polish or whether it's kind of a lighter shade that kind of matches your skin color, or the color of your, just kind of a lighter pinkish tone that kind of is more of a natural color for the interview. Once you get into the job and kind of prove yourself, and when people kind of start knowing you and knowing your personality, I think that's when you can kind of start experimenting a little bit. I wouldn't say go full force. I would just kind of say, observe and see who we'll be interacting with on a daily basis, and then go from there. I would just, in other words, at the interview, keep it natural, simple, and then once determination as to whether it's appropriate to do that. But definitely, if you have the opportunity, and especially like if you're in a creative environment, I can definitely see someone doing that without a problem. But if you're working in more of a conservative, or if it's called a professional industry, definitely take a little bit of time to see if it's appropriate for that culture.
We have another question, Bernice, and I know to our attendees, we are going over time here, so my apologies, but I want to make sure, and this is a rather large question, so to the person who asked this question, cover what we can now, and we'll potentially reach out to you on a one-on-one basis if we are not able to cover the full extent of your question. The question is, how do you navigate through environments where you have to change company culture in order to succeed as an individual? In that case, I'm assuming, would you recommend that person leave and find a better fit, or recommend that they try and change from within?
So changing from within is very, very difficult, and I'm afraid that a lot of times one person can't do it. So you really have to make a determination as to whether you want to stay at that company. I've left many companies because my values did not align with the company values, or the behaviors I was seeing from other employees was not the behaviors I wanted to be associated with. So I ended up leaving the company. So that's really something that you have to. It's definitely a huge question, but I definitely would. My advice would be to determine whether you're able to leave a company and secure another role, and also whether you're willing to either tolerate it or whether you think it's you need to leave in order to get that change that you're looking for. But changing the company or changing the culture internally, very difficult. I'm a change management consultant as my day job. Even in my role, very difficult to change company culture. So I would definitely encourage you to think about your options and see if you can secure another opportunity that you can go into.
Thank you so much, Bernice. And to the person who asked that question, I would encourage you, Bernice, to run a consultancy for growing forward. If you're interested in her services, her bio is listed on our website, and you can reach out to her directly. And without further ado, I think we're going to tie up our session for today. Bernice, I just want to thank you so much with gratitude from the Alumni Association here at UCR. Greatly appreciate all of your advice. Everything you covered was spot on. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all that attended.
Yes. And to the rest of our attendees, a recording of our session will be sent to you following this event. I also would encourage you to schedule our next webinar, which is going to be working with a recruiter, and that is scheduled for August 14th. Without further ado, we're going to sign off. Thank you so much, Bernice.
Thanks.